Hey everybody, welcome again to another exciting episode of Crowdsourced Politics News Roundup. I am your host and moderator, Cypher here. We are coming at you with a ton of news today. Even though it's been a slow week, we've just been off the air for 2 weeks now, and this is the last stream of the year. So let's do a little bit of recap of what we've covered so far. So the things that have been happening new with Crowdsourced Politics is that we started another episode. We started another cast called Cypher State. Cypher State is a foreign affairs and foreign policy focused podcast where we gather political heads from Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, and beyond to talk about things that are impacting the geopolitical stage and go into a little bit more in depth than you might get on your local news or maybe, I don't know, even sometimes even NPR. So be sure to check that out. It's generally speaking on the third Sunday of every month, unless studied otherwise. And we are happily joined on a regular basis by the gracious Tiberius D and North Countryman, two more conservative folks when it comes to geopolitical politics than myself, and it's a good time. So if you want to check that out, you can get that wherever you get your podcast or on YouTube when you desire. Our last episode was Taliban land, and that went over what happened in Afghanistan since America pulled out and the Taliban took over, as of when it was published, which was about a month ago. So if you want to check that out, again, wherever you get your podcast or YouTube if you prefer video. We are going to be starting a new, sorry, let me go back in the past before talking about new stuff. We also did a charity stream, and during our charity stream, we raised money for Refugee Services of Texas. Refugee Services of Texas is a Texas nonprofit that helps with the resettlement of refugees, working with with government organizations and other nonprofits in order to ensure that refugees that come into the United States can find housing and get integrated into the community. It was a fairly good success. We did it on the 18th of this month, right before the Christmas holidays, and managed to raise $85 that passed through us as a podcast. And so that money was given over to Refugee Services of Texas via a donation from our bank account, and it was good. We raised $85, and hey, that's all $85 more than they would have had otherwise. So we were told that another $25 donation was made directly to them, and we trust that person, so we raised a total of $110 for Refugee Services of Texas. So it was great fun. We had a lot of stuff going on. We talked a lot about different things, and one of those things that we did talk about was immigration and refugees with a couple of experts. A member of our community from Facebook, Tishigan, joined us. She is an immigration lawyer focusing on the business side of the house, but has previous experience working with both illegal and legal immigration people, asylum seekers and the like, and also from our broader community, Universal Discourse, who has worked with NGOs in Iraq, Afghanistan, and beyond, who also was able to shed light on the plight of refugees and what kind of things governments and non-government organizations can do and what we can do as a community in order to help refugees. So we were able, like I said, to raise $110 for refugees, and it was good showing all around. So this is something that we are going to do on a regular basis. Right now, we are thinking of doing it quarterly. So once a quarter, we'll have an entire month dedicated to a specific charity. I don't know when in the quarter it will be. Hopefully it'll be the second month of each quarter. So we're thinking like February, April, July, etc., October, starting from the new year. But that can be hit or miss depending on personal schedules and what we can work with other people to make them even better. Our next charity stream will be for children. We don't know what organization we're going to support. We are still looking at as a group, but it will be a charity directed for children in some capacity. And during that charity stream in that month, I will be also game streaming, and I will be playing Kingdom Hearts from start to finish. That includes Game 1, Dream Drop Destiny, the card games that are on the DS. I'll be playing all the different Kingdom Hearts games trying to raise money for children. and I'll be streaming them here on this channel, and you'll be able to catch that out while we talk politics or just have some fun with some Kingdom Hearts, right? So that's what we're going to be doing for our charity stream next. And then we are also into the new year. We're going to start another podcast called Praxis Run, where I am going to interview people both in the Twitch and YouTube political debate communities that have had direct access putting their praxis into action, actually doing praxis, as well as trying to get a hold of some epic academics and local to Austin or Texas activists that have also put their philosophy into action. So be sure to be on the lookout for that. All this stuff will be available on Twitch, YouTube, and for Praxis Run, also podcasts wherever you get your podcast from. And our schedule will be updated to our schedule calendar, which is located in the links in the About section. And it's a Google Calendar, so be sure to be on the lookout for that. So, yeah, that is what we are going to be doing in the new year. That's what we did in the year. Hey, thanks, Andrew Harris. Appreciate it. Good luck keeping track of the timeline. Ain't that the truth? Holy crap. But, so that's what we're going to be doing. And so we're going to go ahead and get started with the news. All right, welcome back, everyone. Hey, hopefully that didn't take too long and you actually enjoyed your little intro video. So let's go ahead and get started. At the top of the news, we'll be discussing some things coming out of Congress. So Congress has been in recess over the last 2 weeks and until the new year. But since we were off last week, let's catch up on the news that happened before the legislative break. The Biden administration and Congress responded to China's treatment of Uyghur Muslims earlier this month, when the administration imposed sanctions and Congress passed an important ban on the region. Let's begin with some background coming at you from the BBC. Human rights groups believe China has detained more than 1 million Uyghurs against their will over the past few years in a large network of what the state calls re-education camps, and sentenced hundreds of thousands to prison term. The U.S. is among several countries to have accused China of committing genocide in Xinjiang, defined by international convention as the intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. The leading human rights group, Amnesty and Human Rights Watch, have published reports accusing China of crimes against humanity. The declaration follows reports that in addition to the re-education camps, China has been forcefully mass sterilizing Uyghur women to suppress the population, separating children from their families, and attempting to break the cultural traditions of the group. China denies all these allegations of human rights abuses in Xinjiang, claiming its system of re-education camps are there to combat separatism and Islamist militancy in the region. There are about 12 million Uyghurs, all mostly Muslim, living in Xinjiang, which is officially known as the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. Recent decades have seen a mass migration of Han Chinese, China's ethnic majority, into Xinjiang, allegedly orchestrated by the state to dilute the minority population there. Minority population compared to China, but within this region, they make up a majority. China has also been accused of targeting Muslims' religious figures and banning religious practices in the region, as well as destroying mosques and tombs. Uyghur activists say that they fear that the group's culture is under threat of erasure. Xinjiang is mostly a desert region and produces about a fifth of the world's cotton. We're going to pull up a map really quick here. Let's see. There. Oh, I didn't do the reset the Chrome. There we go. So this is where Xinjiang is. You can see it's in the westernmost part of China, buttressing up against Middle Eastern countries and Far East countries. And what is this? And oh yeah, that just gives you a bit of clarity on that. Coming back over. Oop. So human rights groups have voiced concerns that much of the cotton export is picked by forced labor, and in 2021, some Western bans removed Xinjiang cotton from their supply chains. The region is also rich in oil and natural gas. And because of its proximity to Central Asia and Europe, it's seen as by Beijing as an important trade link. After months of refusing to take a stand on this issue, the Biden administration indicated this month that the president would sign the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act when the bill was passed by Congress. The bill passed with overwhelming bipartisan support on the 16th of December, and it was signed into law by President on December 23rd. Excuse me. So if you didn't know, a genocide does not require the entire destruction of a population. It requires you to target a population for destruction, and that destruction can include culture. So what China is doing with these re-education camps is similar in scope but not in scale to what the United States did, and the United States and Canada did to its native populations therein. The re-education camps are what the Cultural Revolution, the Great Leap Forward, did to the Han Chinese under Mao, and this time it's targeting the Uyghur population. And then, not only that, but it is also by separating children from their families and putting them into education programs away from their families, away from their culture. The idea is similar to kill the Indian, but not the man. And so we can see why this would be seen as genocide by a lot of people, despite the fact that some leftists online disagree that it is actually even happening. But we have evidence that it is. If we can come back up to, see if I can see this. So if we come back over here, I think that's the right button. Nope, that's the wrong button. Sorry, I pushed the wrong button. I got a Stream Deck and I still pressed the wrong buttons. So as you can see here, this is the re-education. This is the education camp. In 2015, there was nothing there. In 2018, there's a ton of stuff, right? Let's see. Can you see that better? Yeah, that's better. So nothing. 2018, there's some buildings here and stuff like that, and then it just like tripled in size from 2020. These are satellite photos. These are Google Map photos. You can look these up online yourself and prove that there has been this construction of this camp. Now, a lot of people will be saying, oh, it's all fake, it's CIA propaganda or what have you, but no, it really isn't. Now, we do know that there are instances where people do lie or misunderstand what's happening and stuff like that. So that can be maybe what's partly going on here. But given the fact that the Chinese government has allowed, the CCP has allowed Western journalists into these camps, and it was very sussy, like super sussy. We're talking about like everybody saying the same thing, everybody being overly happy, there being the watchful eye of the government police over the shoulders of people and all this kind of stuff here with that while they're interviewing these people. And they all seem to have this kind of skittishness about them. You can watch this on the BBC. I'm pretty sure it's the BBC. And it comes off as forced, as staged, as scripted. And so don't let people lie to you and say that this isn't what was going on. Now, because of partly due to Western pressure and partly due to China maybe having succeeded in what their goal was or trying to hide it more, there has been some takedown of these larger encampments. But that doesn't mean this isn't still going on. When you have a police state, everybody in a neighborhood can also enforce your will, especially if you have a lot of government agents within the population, embedded within the population. In addition to what we have discussed so far, there have been also reports of forcing Uyghur women to share rooms and beds with Han Chinese men. What that could entail is up in the air. You can let your imagination go wild with that one, but we don't have any direct reports of well, at least I haven't read any direct reports of rape happening. But to say that that didn't happen for certain is probably a bridge too far. So the stuff that China is doing with this is very, very bad. Incredibly bad. So like I said, don't let people tell you one way or the other about it. This is what is going on in China. Continuing on. So, let's see. Human right. Wait, where was I? Okay. PBS. Okay. According to PBS, the bill bars imports from China's Xinjiang region unless businesses can prove that they were produced without forced labor. The legislation requires government agencies to expand their monitoring of the use of forced labor by China's ethnic minorities. Now, what this is targeting U.S. businesses and people that import things into the United States in order to put pressure on China by basically removing this kind of revenue stream from the equation. Now, we've had these kind of sanctions before, and we know that they don't always work very well. There was a huge uproar in the 90s about various brands, Tommy Hilfiger. There was several celebrity brands, and I can't remember the name off the top of my head right now. Nike is one where there was a lot of child labor that was being used to produce these cloth items. And so there was laws and regulations passed similar to this in the 90s. And what it basically did was it pushed it more underground, or these companies went to they obfuscated their involvement in these things by putting 2 or 3 people between them and their suppliers. So what they would do is they would hire a subcontractor, and that subcontractor would hire another one, and so on. And then eventually there was maybe 3 or 4 people down the line, and that person was the one that was supposed to be responsible for ensuring that the factory didn't have child labor in it. And so it is not likely, at least in my opinion, that this will work, but it could work to a small degree. Small degree because of scale is still a lot, but I don't expect it to work entirely as well as people might hope based on the history of these kind of laws and regulations before. Continuing on. Crucially, it creates a presumption that goods coming from Xinjiang are made with forced labor. This is a change. This is the change to everything that I said before. So this will give it more weight and more teeth, because it's basically saying anything that comes out of this region is bad. So, but China's big. China can move people around. China probably will. Businesses will also have to prove that forced labor played no part in a product to bring it into the United States. The Biden administration has announced new sanctions targeting several Chinese biotech and surveillance companies as well as government entities for their actions in Xinjiang. New sanctions from the Commerce Department targeted China's Academy of Military and Medical Sciences and its 11 research institutes that focus on using biotechnology to support the Chinese military. The move will bar American companies from selling components to the entities without a license. China is, quote, choosing to use the technologies to pursue control over its people and repression of members of ethnic and religious minority groups, Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo said in a statement. We cannot allow the U.S. commodities, technologies, and software that support medical sciences and biotechnical innovations to be diverted toward uses contrary to the United States national security. U.S. intelligence has established that Beijing has set up high-tech surveillance systems across Xinjiang that uses biometric facial recognition and has collected DNA samples from all residents ages 12 to 65 in Xinjiang as part of a systemic effort to suppress the Uyghurs. Now, again, sometimes when America does things, other countries pick this up. We were doing not at this scale. Don't get me wrong, not at all at this scale. Not trying to say the U.S. is worse. No, we didn't do it at the scale. While working in Afghanistan and Iraq, when we encountered would-be suspects, we did collect their biometrics as well. Iris scans, facial scans, and at sometimes, especially if they were in some sort of criminal activity, grift, theft, whatever, we would also take their DNA. And so we would use that in order to help track down people that were bad based on photos and informants and stuff like that. And China is taking these technologies that have been developed for these kind of purposes and applying it writ large to the entire population in Xinjiang. And that, my friend, is another way that you get to a genocide level event. So let's continue on. The department, in a rule detailing its decision and a review by multiple federal agencies, had determined that the Chinese Academy and Research Institutes use biotechnology processes to support Chinese military end uses and end users, to include purported brain control weaponry. That seems a bit much. I'm not going to say that's probably a little bit too far. I don't see brain control. I mean, okay, the men that stare at people that watch this program probably are interested in a lot of political stuff, things like I am, and so they might be aware of like the men that stare at goats and that sort of thing there, where we tried a lot of this stuff in the 60s and 70s with like looking into the occult, looking into different things in order to improve America's ability to fight the Russians. And at the time, I mean, technology has advanced super far, right? So at the time, there wasn't much that was able to be derived. I mean, we created a truth serum and experimented with LSD a lot, but I don't see a brain control weapon being possible at this point. All right. So continuing on. So Desert News reported China's response to the sanctions and the new law. China's Washington embassy said that the act ignores the truth and maliciously slanders the human rights situation in Xinjiang, according to Reuters. This is a violation of international law and norms of international relations and a gross interference in Chinese internal affairs. China strongly condemns and firmly rejects it, embassy spokesman Lu Pyong said in an email statement. Or Pengui, sorry, not Pyong, Pengui. He said China, quote, would respond further in light of the development of the situation, but did not elaborate. So that is what is going on with China. So let me know your thoughts, though. I am on Twitter a lot, so go ahead and, tweet us at Crowdsourced Poll. Let them know what you think about China and the situation they're in, and we can talk about it at your convenience. And I want to know what the community's thinking about. All right, so let's do it. All right, continuing on. Now we also have some updates around the Build Back Better bill and the fact that Manchin is a spiteful little dick. Yes, I said little dick because he's got a little dick. All right, let's continue. Much to the surprise of the White House and his Democratic colleagues, and to the delight of Republicans in Congress, Senator Joe Manchin appeared on Fox News Sunday program prior to Christmas and announced he will not support the social infrastructure bill that he's been negotiating with President Biden for months. While the senator claimed his decision was based on the cost of the bill, private conversations revealed by his colleagues seemed to indicate otherwise. Several of Manchin's colleagues said that he had told them he is concerned that parents would spend the money from the extended child tax credit on drugs instead of caring for their children. This has got to be the most Republican fucking talking point I have heard out of a Democrat's mouth since since Bill Clinton. Yes, that's where we're going back to 92, everybody. But no, in all seriousness, like if you think that there is a statistically significant portion of people with kids that are going to spend this money on themselves and not their children, you are an idiot. And you're letting your political ideology mask you from understanding the truth. You got stuff in your eyes, all right? Okay. I know people, or I've known of people, that have used welfare and stuff like that, unlike welfare money on maybe some drugs, or maybe some like clothes from themselves, or what have you, right? I'm sure that everybody that grew up poor knows that person. How percentage of people that qualify for welfare you think are doing this? Do you think it's more than 10%? You think it's 20%? If you think it's less than 20%, why do you care? I mean, hell, if it's less than 30%, why do you care? I'm being dead serious. In the grand scheme of things, you're still helping 70% of the people you're attempting to. And so 30% just, I don't know, buy some drugs. Who gives a shit? I'm being serious. I don't care. Because that's still 70% of people doing the right thing. And we know, and I know, I should say, I know it's less than that. It might be 5% of the population that does these things. Maybe even less than that. It is not statistically significant. And you know how do I know that? I know that because when states have implemented drug testing or welfare recipients, they spent more money than they recuperated in not giving welfare checks out. It was less than 10% of the, actually, it was less than 5% of the population that applied for welfare that got denied. And so some Republicans have said things, well, like, we stop people from even bothering to sign up because we don't want them druggies getting those things on the thing, right? I don't know what you meant by that. But what we're getting at here, what is important here, is the fact that they spent more money drug testing people than they prevented from going out on welfare. I think the Republicans said on the high end, it was like, I think it was like 12% on the high end is what they estimated because of less people signing up for welfare. But you have to look at the time frame that happened in and compare it to what the welfare situation was going across the country. Maybe the economy was just better at the time. I don't know. I haven't looked at the poll, not the poll. I haven't looked at the study recently, but this was done when Scott Walker and Rick Scott, Florida, implemented this, and a smattering of Republican legislatures in states and governors implemented these rules, and they just spent way more money than they recuperated. It was a net loss. So that's how I know this is bullshit. According to people with knowledge of this conversation, Manchin has also said that the proposed sick leave policies would be exploited by people who would fake being sick and go hunting instead of going to work. Again, who cares? Why do you give a shit? The United States is in the developed world, in the Western world, takes the least amount of vacation of any other group. Other groups have mandatory minimum 6 weeks of vacation that they have to take. Mandatory. The United States, people barely take 2 weeks off in the US. I am able to accumulate 20 days off from my job a year. I have taken off maybe half of that this year, right? But I don't get any sick days, so I'm saving some of those days in case I get sick. So why do people care if somebody's like, sorry, I can't, can't come to work, Bob. I got the Rona. You don't want to get at me. All right, boys, let's go hunting. Like, come on. Really? Cares? Why do you care? Why do you care? It's like 5 days. Who gives a shit? As long as the work's being done and everything's being accomplished, who cares? That's the way I'm at with this. Maybe I'm just a weak heart lefty. I don't know. You tell me though. But yeah, that's another thing. And this is another talking point. Like, I honestly can't care about it. All right, continuing on though. A day after his announcement on Fox News, the senator appeared on Talkline, a radio program airing across West Virginia on 24 stations, where, according to the Washington Post, he said, Democrat leaders figured surely to God we can move one person. Surely we can badger and beat one person up. Surely we can get enough protesters to make that person uncomfortable enough. They'll just say, okay, I'll vote for anything. Just quit. Well, guess what? I'm from West Virginia. I'm not from where they're from. They can just beat the living crap out of people and think they'll be submissive. I just got to get my wits' end, and they know the real reason what happened. They won't tell you, and I won't tell you. So this is Manchin being Manchin. I honestly believe, and I warned people about this. You can go on Twitter, you can look it up when people are praising praising the progressives and Bernie Sanders for showing up and like giving Manchin shit. I warned him that he would act out of spite. He is a Southern boy. And I'm not talking shit about Southerners here. I'm just saying they do things differently down there. And they will come for you out of spite. And I think that's what is happening here. I think a lot of what is driving Manchin to be like, nope, not going to do it, is they hurt my feelings. They disrespected me in my home. I'm not going to stand for it. I really think that's probably partly what's going on here. I have no reason to believe otherwise, especially since I called that shit. So, Manchin's seemingly abrupt about face left the White House and his Democratic colleagues angry and disappointed and prompted criticism from countless internet groups, among them United Mine Workers of America. Now, what is the United Mine Workers of America? Well, those are the people that are coal miners. So he's getting it from both ends now. He's getting it from the left. He's getting it from the right. I can vouch for that. Spite is 90% of my motivation. We're going to put that one up. That's a good one. This is our buddy Andrew Harris. Hey, buddy. Glad you're watching from Facebook. So, boom. 90% of his motivation in life. True. Spite is a good motivator. I'm probably doing this podcast out of, you know what? I'm kind of doing this podcast out of spite. Just a little bit. But we won't get into that here. All right, continuing on with the news. So, the labor union noted that the bill includes an extension of a fund that provides benefits to coal miners suffering from black lung disease, which expires at the end of this year. The UMWA also touted tax incentives that encourage manufacturers to build facilities in coal fields that would employ thousands of miners who lost their jobs. For those and other reasons, we're disappointed that the bill will not pass, Cecil Roberts, the union's president, said in a statement. We urge Senator Manchin to revisit his opposition to this legislation and work with his colleagues to pass something that will keep coal miners working and have a meaningful impact on our members, their families, and their communities. West Virginia News further reported that, meanwhile, Gas and Oil Association of West Virginia, the national gas industry trade organization in West Virginia, joined several similar organizations from surrounding states, thanking Manchin for his leadership against the Build Back Better. It's almost like Manchin is bought and paid for by big oil, big coal. Yeah. I'm not gonna say Manchin's corrupt, but you know what? He's corrupt. He's getting it what he wants. He's taking it all in. Anyways, continuing on. Provisions of the reconciliation package, including the methane gas tax, would have been devastating to sustain job growth, while stinging consumers with higher energy costs as many bear the inflation burden. Now this is a thing, right? So everything that can be wrong to a group of people right now is going to be like, it's going to cause inflation, because inflation's on everybody's minds right now. Whether or not you believe inflation is transitory, whether or not you believe it's anything to be actually seriously worried about, it is on the minds of Americans across the United States, across the political spectrum. So if they can latch onto that, if they can hop on that saddle and ride a little bit, they're going to do it. All right. And so we're seeing big businesses say, oh, you can't do this. It's going to raise prices. But do they ever? Not that they ever raise prices. I mean, they do. They raise prices. But do they ever consider maybe, just maybe, you can take a little bit of a profit cut? I mean, let's be real here. All right. So there's been things that happened in the United States where we saw a group of people get a little bit of a pay raise and prices on a good went up by a penny. Most importantly, farmers. Or, I'm sorry, I should say farm workers in Florida negotiated an increase in the amount that they get paid for the tomatoes they pick. I think they got an increase of like $10 10 cents per bushel, something like that. All right. The average price of tomatoes and restaurant prices went up by a penny. The average pay that a farm picker made went up by like $5,000. Scale, people. Keep it in your head, all right? Not only that, the reason why there's this methane gas tax is because oil companies, natural gas companies are just emitting the shit everywhere. If you go to a natural gas extraction point anywhere, Pennsylvania, I mean, shit, they're dotted all over across the country. Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, New York, California, Texas, Missouri, Tennessee, even. I mean, if you go to any of these places where there are natural gas pipelines and you go at, I don't know, night, you can see it burning off instead of being captured. Why is it being burned off? Because instead of being captured, because it's cheaper for the company to emit it into the atmosphere than put it in a fucking container. So just burning that shit, wasting it, because it's cheaper. And that is what this tax is designed to prevent. Republicans and conservatives like to talk about externalities about things all the time, unintended consequences. What about the unintended consequences of increasing the temperature during winter right now? Now, I know it's snowing in some places right now, but normally at this time of year in Texas, it would be like 60, 50 degrees, not 82. I'm just saying, climate change is real, people, and got to keep on that shit. And this is one of those things that incrementally could help prevent that. So, continuing on. The association's executive director, Charlie Bird, said that at some point, Congress will understand that there must be a future for fossil fuels. There doesn't need to be. The only thing that we do not have a replacement for at this moment is strong plastics. And there's some chemicals that really good in the industrial creation of medicines like aspirin and stuff that we also derive from oil and gas extraction. But as far as like vehicle transportation and things like that, a lot of it can be replaced. Honestly, we probably should just get rid of single plastic use containers and replace that stuff with slightly more expensive plant-based plastic containers, because that stuff will biodegrade, unlike plastic. These are the kind of things that need to be regulated because they're not going to do it themselves. Or at least not on a scale and quick enough that we need. So that's where I'm at with that. Continuing on with this, though, I believe that there will be a level of reality that kind of takes hold in Washington, D.C. over time as they see these programs to eliminate fossil fuels will not really achieve the goals that they want to achieve. Recent reporting indicates that the president and the senator are once again talking about the bill, and that there is continued hope that the centerpiece of Biden's agenda will pass in 2022. Everything but yes, that is true. But I forgot to include this, but there's basically, Andrew Harris says, everything but space travel can be included, be replaced. And there's been a development recently, and I don't know if it's in the copy, so I'm just going to say it now, that there is basically this giant wind-up thing that can launch satellites into space. Yeah, it uses the power of torque, and you know, when you're like in a ratchet, you know how if you like you have like a very wound up thing, and then you let it go, and it mechanics to like let it move and stuff, like those wind up toys. Yeah, it's that, but it launches satellites. It's ginormous. Takes a lot less energy than launching a rocket, because you can power it with regular electricity, and so that's less emissions. And it can actually be powered over time just by the sun. You could make it solar powered. So maybe one day, buddy, we'll be trebucheting rockets into space. One can dream. One can dream. All right. Moving on from Senator Manchin. Even as Senator Manchin shot down the Build Back Better bill, he appeared to signal support for changing the filibuster rules and his support for voting rights legislation. Gotta keep the lobbyists happy, but you know what? This is something that I worked on myself, and I need that to pass. That's the thinking going on here. All right. So Rolling Stones reported that in the same Fox News interview where he said he wouldn't vote for the Build Back Better Act, Manchin suggested he is open to the possibility of changing the Senate rules if it will make the chamber more functional. Can we work on the rules that make the Senate work rather than the deadlock we have right now? He told Fox's Brett Barr. Everyone thinks that the end all do all is basically in the filibuster. It's basically in how we operate and proceed every day of the Senate, which we're not doing. That's what needs to change, he further elaborated. With voting rights, Manchin stated his position early on, and his fellow Democrats quickly adapted accordingly. The Senate is poised to take up a Freedom to Vote Act, and the filibuster reforming it would require early next year. In that fight, activists and lobbyists say the White House has played a minor role at best instead of letting Senator Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and other moderate Democrats take the lead. Now, Democrats officials and activists deeply involved in the voting rights battle say that they can't afford to repeat the same mistakes made in the Build Back Better negotiations if they want to have any chance of passing the Freedom to Vote Act. Quote, "This is a dicey moment where we'll see what happens when you miscalculate how to handle Manchin," one leading vote right activist had said. Quote, "If you hit the wrong target and send him the wrong way, it's hard to reverse course." It's spite. It's spite. And unlike every other Democrat in the Senate right now, he's pretty much the only Democrat that could win in West Virginia. He is the linchpin right now, which sucks. It really sucks. Because 2022 is going to be a hard year for Democrats, especially if the economy suffers any minor setback. Even deflation will cause people to be like, "Oh, what's the Democrats doing?" No, that's what we're doing. All right. So continuing on here, we are going to watch AOC's report card. And it's a report card of what AOC believes that should happen. This would happen this year and everything else. And we're going to watch this because it is something that's interesting. It is something new. It is not necessarily an endorsement of all the points that are being made, but this is going to be a thing that other people within Congress, the Senate, and politicians up and down the chain are likely to engage in, especially among the younger crowd. AOC already opened the doors to doing these kind of things with her foray into Twitch gaming, with playing Among Us with several big name Twitch streamers in the political space. And so she's kind of a movement maker, even though that she hasn't been able to get much passed in Congress and doesn't seem to know to play ball sometimes. These are things that are going to be being done more in the future. So let's go ahead and watch that. I gotta make sure it's sharing. Okay, cool. Oh, that's stretched. Oh, that's why. There we go. That's better. All right.
Hey everybody, unbelievably, we are coming to the end of 2021. So for the second year in a row, we wanted to take a moment to look back at some of our collective accomplishments over the year. We do things a little bit differently here with Team AOC. So no matter if there's an election year or not, we stay organizing all year round. So in addition to some of our exciting work in Congress,
staying
we also
organizing
have a
is
lot
important.
of powerful community building wins for us to share. So let's get to it. Here are 21 wins.
And organizing, the reason that it's so important. Oh wait, I need to turn on the banner. Bupkis. That's fine. I'll just keep it off. Whoops. Oh, dang it. There we go. And I'll turn off the border too. There we go. I'll just be this little me in the corner right here. All right. So, but organizing is very important. And the reason it's very important is because it can get victories on the local level, and a lot of things need to be tackled on the local level. And it also keeps your voters engaged with you. And it shows that you are doing something. Even if you can't move Congress on a position, if you can leverage your office and your star power and your ability to organize and your staff in a way to positively impact people's lives despite the deadlock that's happening in Congress, it's going to play well to your voters. And so that's why this is important.
From 2021. Number one, our Homework Helpers program provided over 4,000 hours of free tutoring to the community with over 500 volunteer tutors. Two, we launched a deep canvas program on the Green New Deal, knocking over 3,300 doors and trained over 200 organizers on how to organize around tenants' rights and mutual aid programs. Three, we joined our brothers and sisters at Teamsters Local 202 picket line to advocate for the Hunts Point produce market workers, helping win their largest pay raise in the Bronx in over 30 years. Four, after a historic winter freeze in Texas, we raised over $5 million for local charity and mutual aid and joined Reps Green, Jackson Lee, and Garcia in Houston to visit impacted communities. Five, we led the creation of the National Female Funeral Assistance Program, which distributed funds to families nationwide, including New Yorkers who lost loved ones due to COVID-19, in order to cover burial costs. Six, we launched an outreach campaign in 4 languages about vaccine safety and accessibility, reaching over 100,000 people and helping to raise vaccination rates across New York 14. 7, we reintroduced the Green New Deal with 13 new co-sponsors, and in line with our Green New Deal for public housing, we successfully fought to get $65 billion for public housing back in the Build Back Better Act in the House. 8, we secured $30 billion in BBB for the Civilian Conservation Corps, a key Green New Deal tenet which will create over 300,000 jobs when it passes the Senate. 9, we successfully fought to extend the federal eviction moratorium after activists and Congress members joined Representative Cori Bush for a 3-day sit-in on the Capitol steps. 10, when Hurricane Ida devastated parts of our district, we knocked on doors for 6 straight weeks to distribute information on critical relief resources, helping folks apply for up to $34,000 in FEMA assistance, and pushed to extend the deadline to January 4th. 11, we helped stop the construction of the proposed NRG fracked gas peaker plant in Queens, which would have further polluted our air, and successfully passed the community project funding for wind energy job training in the Bronx. 12.
That one's pretty big because one of the things that AOC got flack on previously was helping to stop the move of Amazon into New York, into the Bronx, into the boroughs, and doing it this way where there's an alternative available to help people get into, well, good paying jobs, especially if there are not college educated, is a huge win, especially when you need more techs in order to service solar panels, wind turbines, etc. And so that's good. That's a huge win. So I just wanted to point that out.
We joined the congressional delegation at the UN's climate conference, COP26, where we challenged leaders on the omission of the U.S. military from the calculation of our decarbonization commitments. 13, our congressional office worked with the State Department to help Afghan evacuees, and along with Representatives Barbara Lee, we led 70 members of Congress in calling on the Biden administration to increase the cap on refugees to 200,000 people. 14, we continued our support of the New York Taxi Workers Alliance through their 2-year fight and won a federally backed guarantee for drivers who were victims of a predatory lending scheme around taxi medallions. 15, this year in D.C., I was appointed to the Select Committee on Economic Disparity and Fairness and Growth, where I'm currently advocating for greater worker power in the economy and address generational inequities like student loan cancellation. 16, in the House, we passed legislation to provide nearly $7 million in community project funding to the Bronx and Queens, from job training to multilingual housing support. 17, we fought for the expanded child tax credit, which helped lift 12,000 children in our community alone out of poverty. 18, we introduced 10 bills and 30 amendments, as well as welcoming President Biden to Queens and Dr. Biden and Vice President Harris to the Bronx. 19, we...
All right, so we're going to go ahead and call it there. Moving back over to this little solo panel. Ah, man, I can't say it enough. I love this little tool here. Can you guys see it? Can you see it? It's so beautiful. Stream Deck is very useful. So if you don't have a Stream Deck and you can afford one and you stream, and you do a bunch of different scenes and stuff like we do at Crowdsourced Politics, I highly recommend getting one of these things. I'll even help you set it up. Like, it's good. Just had to put that out there because that's what's helping this be more smooth. But hey, if you're just joining us, welcome to the Crowdsourced Politics News Roundup. We typically do this at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to roughly about 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This is a thing that we like to do to keep our community engaged. Our community is spread across different social media platforms. We have a Facebook group, we have our Discord, we have our members on Twitch and Twitter, and we have people that watch us on YouTube. And so we wanted to be more engaged, get that direct feedback by doing a news roundup live, and that's what we're doing today. So so if you like what you're seeing now, be sure to tune in Thursdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to roughly about 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or catch the VOD the next day on YouTube. We're going to try to put these on podcast. It's a little difficult for me to edit them at the moment, but that's what we're doing here. We're going to be doing another podcast, and we're looking for guests for this one. This other podcast is called Praxis Run. Thanks to my wife for helping me come up with the name. And this is a podcast dedicated to helping people get engaged in their community to do praxis. This is not something that we want to talk about that is just liberal or leftist focused. If you are a decent human being and you happen to be on the right, we want to help you get engaged and put into praxis. So what does that mean to us? It means helping your community be better. So we're going to be interviewing people that have been activists, that are community organizers, that are other Twitch and political talking heads, and come up with ways to help get people engaged and things that people can do on the local level to make their community better. And it can be anything from a charity stream and how to set that up, what the kind of things you need to do, or to creating a local nonprofit to help out a particular need in your city. We're going to cover all these things. We're going to get experts involved, and it's going to be what we are trying to do with Crowdsourced Politics to the masses, or to everybody that is around here. And so that's what we're going to do. So be sure to check out the About section and our calendar for when that is going to happen. And if you or someone you know is a local community organizer, activist, or some other kind of person that helps in your community, whether it's running a soup kitchen, working at a soup kitchen, being helping the elderly, whatever it is, as long as it's helping the community in some capacity, even if it's from a church or some other religious organization, we want to talk to you and help others make the same impact that you are. So go ahead and hit us up on Twitter, and that Twitter is again here. That is at Crowdsourced Poll, or check out the Discord, which is linked in the About section or up here on YouTube, or coming at you in the link now. Oh, I don't know why this doesn't show everywhere. There we go. So yeah, go ahead and join the Discord community like that as well. So we have a comment from a listener, and maybe it isn't me, so we're going to put that on here. Let's see if I can get that. There we go. So she, being AOC, is maturing. She is doing a lot of good things for her people and others also. I look forward to her growth. Likewise, thank you for the comment. And we want to see this kind of thing be normalized among our politicians, among our talking heads, and in a way that kind of used to be a thing. And that's why we're doing this. And that's why we're doing this show. That's why we're going to be doing Praxis Run. And that's why we do our charity streams. So again, if that's something you're interested in, hit us up. We'd like to hear from you. So, man, allergies have been really bad. So you're going to see me itching my nose a lot. All right. Sorry about that. All right. So moving on from this, we have some SCOTUS updates, Supreme Court of the United States updates coming at you next. So we're going to start off with updates about and around vaccine mandates. So the Supreme Court has agreed to review 2 cases concerning vaccine or test mandates next month in a special hearing. The 2 cases are at the heart of the Biden administration's efforts to address COVID-19 in the workplace. The first mandate is directed at businesses with 100 or more employees and would affect more than 84 million workers. The Biden administration's considered this measure central to addressing the pandemic. If the court upholds the mandate, the administration estimated that it would cause 22 million people to get vaccinated and prevent 252,000 hospitalizations. The second measure would require all healthcare workers at hospitals that receive federal funding to be vaccinated. In its emergency application to SCOTUS, the administration wrote that this mandate will save hundreds or even thousands of lives each month. Over the course of this year, the Supreme Court has upheld vaccine mandates imposed by states against constitutional challenges. But these two cases present the question of whether or not Congress has authorized the executive branch to institute such a requirement. So, to give you a little bit of a recap here, the Supreme Court throughout history has allowed governments, and including the federal government at times, to implement vaccine mandates or quarantines or what have you. Generally speaking, these are police actions, yes, police actions, left to the states. And the federal government has taken a step back. But with COVID-19 ravaging, I mean, we have 800,000 people dead from it, right? And the concern of Omicron being more contagious, and even if it's less deadly, the fact that it's more contagious makes it more deadly on scale, potentially. I'm not fear-mongering here. That's what the concern is. As of right now, doesn't seem to be it's more virulent but less deadly, which is a good thing. Hopefully we're burning it out. But that's the concern, and so why these things are going into effect. And I actually agree with these things. But the federal government has generally taken a step back. Another thing that SCOTUS has upheld consistently has been that the federal government can remove funds going to private individuals and state governments for failure to uphold a certain requirement, even requirements that are new. This is called the power of the purse strings. The federal government controls its own budget. It controls where those funds go. And therefore, if the federal government can giveth and taketh away. And so that's why we see these things happening with these kind of mandates. The federal government gives a lot of money to the hospitals, especially in its rural program. And if it threatens to take those dollars away, then it is likely that either the people that are working there either will get vaccinated or they'll get fired by their employer. So now, is this vaccine or test? So there is another option. And so if there's like a shortage of doctors, nurses, or what have you in an area, the likelihood that the hospital in question will fire the person is actually less. But that's still having to pay for tests, and so it's an issue, right? Or not even paying for tests because the federal government pays for most of them. Excuse me. So that's what we're gonna see here. So continuing on though, the answer will most likely turn on the language of the relevant statutes, but there is a reason. Excuse me. Sorry about that. All right. The answer will mostly turn on the language of the relevant statutes, but there is a reason to think that the court's six conservative justices will be skeptical of broad assertions of executive power. The last time the Supreme Court considered a Biden administration program addressing the pandemic, a moratorium on evictions, the justices shut it down. Our system does not permit agencies to act unlawfully, even in the pursuit of desirable ends, the court said in August, in an unsigned opinion over the dissent of 3 liberal justices. The vaccination or test requirement for large employers was issued in November by the Labor Department's Occupational Safety and Health Administration, otherwise known as OSHA. Employers are allowed to give their workers the option to be tested weekly instead of getting the vaccine, though they are not required to pay for the testing. So I was wrong in that, I corrected myself correctly. The federal government is paying for these tests. So it's really nothing. It's basically either get vaccinated or be super cautious and test weekly. I don't really see this as an infringement on your rights, bro. I'm sorry. I don't. The rule makes an exception for employees who do not come into close contact with other people at their job, like those who work at home or exclusively outdoors. Under a 1970 law, OSHA has the authority to issue emergency rules for workplace safety, provided it can show that the workers are exposed to a grave danger and that the rule is necessary. States, businesses, and religious groups challenged the measure in appeals court around the nation, and a unanimous 3-judge panel of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit Court in New Orleans had ruled in favor of some of the challengers, blocking the measure. Last week, after the challengers were consolidated before the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit in Cincinnati, a divided 3-judge panel reinstated the measure. Quote, the record established that COVID-19 has continued to spread, mutate, kill, and block the safe return of Americans workers to their jobs, Judge Jane B. Starch wrote for the majority. To protect workers, OSHA can and must be able to respond to dangers as they evolve. In dissent, Judge John L. Larson wrote that the administration likely lacks congressional authority to impose the vaccine or testing requirement. Quote, the mandate is aimed directly at protecting the unvaccinated from their own choices, she wrote. Vaccines are freely available, and unvaccinated people may choose to protect themselves at any time. Almost immediately, more than a dozen challenges asked the Supreme Court to block the measure. Now, this is getting basically into that quote from the judge is basically getting into the my body, my choice kind of thing in this. The problem with this line of argument, and it's a good line of argument, it's very good rhetorically, it's just not good logically, is that the vaccine isn't only protecting yourself, it is protecting others. It is protecting people that can't get the vaccine, and through the use of herd immunity from vaccination, protecting everyone from a potential mutation, breakthrough cases, etc. Because, as we've seen and as testing has showed, that while a person with the vaccine can still spread it, they are dramatically less likely to spread it than an unvaccinated person. And the breakthrough cases are what they are. We see that after your first 2 shots, that the efficacy of the vaccine drops to, I want to say, around 80% or so, which means that by other people not being vaccinated, they increase the likelihood of spread to those that are and create more breakthrough cases. So this isn't really a my body, my choice argument. This is more of an argument of protecting others directly. Now, conservatives are likely to say, well, that's what we want for abortion. But that whole rub there is whether or not that constitutes a fetus, constitutes a person. Personhood is legally defined. Humanity is also legally and morally defined. It isn't just biology. And that's the philosophical question that is left unanswered. And that's where all the rub comes in. Whether or not life begins at conception or life begins at the first breath, and in that span of time is where the arguments against abortion or for abortion come into play. And so that's why I don't think this, even though it's a good rhetoric tactic to say my body, my choice when it comes to vaccines, it isn't a good logical one because the differences are major, at least in my opinion. But again, tell me what you think. So continuing on. The court initially had these 2 cases on the shadow docket, which would have meant that the decisions would have made without full briefings and argument. The shadow docket came under intense public fire early this year. The court's decision to hold public hearings for those 2 cases may have been in response to the criticism of that practice. Oral arguments are set for Friday, January 7th of 2022. And be sure to check out this program, and we'll have updates for you when we have them. More's coming out from SCOTUS. So former President Trump appeals executive privilege case. What? What's this? Well, let's find out. Last Thursday, former President Donald Trump asked the SCOTUS to block the release of White House records to the Select Committee investigating the January 6 attacks on the Capitol. The committee is seeking documents that show Trump's communications and activities in the lead up to the attack. In Trump's view, these records should be kept under the power of executive privilege, but 2 lower courts have rejected that argument. Trump is hoping he will find the Supreme Court more receptive. How on the Court reported that the legal dispute now before the court began in August when the Select Committee asked the National Archives to turn over White House documents relating to activities of January 6. Trump claimed that nearly 800 pages of documents that the U.S. archivists intended to turn over were covered by executive privilege, which allow a president to maintain the secrecy of documents reflecting presidential decision-making and deliberations. However, President Joe Biden told the archivists that the documents should be released, explaining that he had determined that an assertion of executive privilege is not in the best interest of the United States and therefore is not justified as to any of the documents. Quote, the constitutional protections of executive privilege should not be used to shield from Congress or the public, Biden reasoned, information that reflects a clear and apparent effort to subvert the Constitution itself. Trump went to federal court in Washington, D.C. on October 18th, seeking to stop the archivist from disclosing the documents, where the district court denied Trump's motion for a preliminary injunction. Trump then went to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit. In a 65 opinion page by Judge Patricia Millett, a 3-judge panel upheld the district court's ruling, clearing the way for the archivist to release the documents. Describing the events on January 6 as the, quote, most significant assault on the Capitol since the War of 1812, Millett stressed that the executive privilege is held by the executive branch for the country's benefit, rather than the president's. It protects, she observed, the public interest in candid, confidential deliberations within the executive branch. She added that the privilege is not an absolute one. It can be waived by a sitting president, which has been consistently upheld by the Supreme Court. So if you believe in stare decisis, the Supreme Court should also uphold this. If it doesn't, then it is political. She added that the privilege is not an absolute one. It can be waived by a sitting president, as previously stated. And in this case, she continued, both Biden and Congress agrees that there is a unique legislative need for these documents and that they are directly relevant to the committee's inquiry into an attack on Congress. Trump had provided only a grab bag of objections that were not enough for the court to overrule Biden's decision to waive executive privilege, she concluded. In his petition, for review of the D.C. Circuit Court's decision, Trump complained that the lower court had declined to adopt an objective test, providing for a reliable and politically neutral standard to decide disputes regarding access to former presidents' confidential records. Instead, he argued, the lower court decisions, quote, support the invasion of a presidential confidentiality on the basis that the incumbent president and one house of Congress support the involuntary waiver of the former president's constitutionally and statutorily protected rights. Moreover, Trump added, the dispute presents an important problem that is likely to reoccur in an increasingly partisan political climate. In other words, if I don't get my way, we're going to keep doing this to y'all too. We're going to get all the stuff. We're just going to waive all the privilege because that's what we do. We think this is political. It's not political. It's political to protect it. I don't think it's political to release it. And it's also interesting that he's taking this kind of view, because presidential privilege doesn't extend beyond your term in office. And so it really logically means that it rests within the house of the executive branch. Now, maybe there could be more rules about it, maybe, but this is just posturing and trying to avoid any kind of accountability. Trump suggested his case could be briefed and argued during the court's 21-22 term, which would allow the court's decision to resolve not only the current dispute over this first set of documents that the archivist intends to turn over, but also any future disputes that are likely to arise in the committee's investigation. To that end, Trump addressed the justices to put the D.C. Circuit decision allowing the disclosure of the first set of documents on hold and to block the archivist from turning over any other materials that could be privileged until the dispute is resolved. They're essentially the reason that they're doing this route is that they're trying to use the Supreme Court to slow down the release of this information in order to help in the elections of 2022 and 2024. If the Supreme Court doesn't hear this quickly, it could take a year or 2 years. And by that time, it becomes a direct political matter and a useful tool to energize the Republican base, especially if Trump does run in 2024. Continuing on, the former president's application to put the D.C. Circuit's decision on hold goes initially to Chief Justice John Roberts, who handles emergency appeals for the D.C. Circuit. Roberts can act on the request alone or, isn't more likely, refer it to the full court. A few hours after Trump filed his request, the House Committee and archivists asked the justices to fast-track their consideration of Trump's petition for review. Under normal circumstances, briefs opposing the petition would be due on January 24th. But the committee and the archivists indicated that they instead plan to file their briefs opposing review and opposing a stay on the D.C. Circuit's decision on December 30th, and they asked the justices to consider the case at their private conference on January 14th. Trump has also consented to their proposed timetable, they told the court. So Trump wants the court to quickly say you can't do this, but he also wants it to drag out. So he wants to put a stay on it and then allow the court to review it again in total. So we'll see. We'll see what the court decides. But if you're just joining us, maybe this is the first time you've watching the program. Maybe it's not. I don't know. Either way, we're going to plug the Tribune. As many of you know, and I'm sure some of you don't, Crowdsourced Politics is part of a nonprofit network called the Crowdsourced Tribune. Crowdsourced Tribune is a nonprofit registered in the state of Texas, where I currently reside, that is designed to tamp down on vitriol and as well as inform the public in an educational and informative way. Education, informative, and entertaining way, I should say. So if you are interested in what that nonprofit is, be sure to check us out currently on Facebook. That's where we're at right now. We're still in the stages of building our website, which we hope to have completed within the first quarter of this year, or at least if it's not super completed, at least up and running so that people can look for updates on a one-stop shop rather than going to a bunch of different links and stuff like that. So yeah, that is what we're doing. So check out the Facebook page coming at you now. So we got another comment on our last topic, so I want to get that in before the comment before we move on. So it really doesn't make sense. The power rests with the office of the president. A former president shouldn't even have legal standing to make this claim. True. Thank you, Andrew, for piggybacking off of that. I don't know how delayed Facebook is. Facebook has a pretty long delay, but that is very much true. 100% agree with that statement. Thank you for echoing it. So moving on. And we got some interesting news bites coming at you. So first things first, the James Webb Space Telescope has started to open its wings. The James Webb Space successfully launched on Christmas morning. The telescope is the world's most powerful and complex space observatory. Webb will peer into the very atmosphere of exoplanets, some of which are potentially habitable, and it could uncover clues in the ongoing search for life outside of Earth. The telescope comes equipped with a mirror that extends 21 feet and 4 inches, or 6.5 meters. A massive length that will allow the mirror to collect more light from objects it has observed once the telescope is in space. The more light the mirror can collect, the more details the telescope can observe. It's the largest mirror NASA has ever built, the agency said, and its size created a unique problem. The mirror was so large that it couldn't fit inside a rocket. So the NASA team designed a telescope as a series of moving parts that can fold origami style and fit a 16-foot, 5-meter space for launch. Webb will act as an infrared detective, detecting light that is invisible to us and revealing otherwise hidden regions of space, according to NASA. Since 2004, thousands of scientists, technicians, engineers from 14 countries have spent 40 million hours building this telescope. The Webb's telescope will look at every phase of cosmic history, including the first glows after the Big Bang that created our universe and the foundation of galaxies, stars, and planets that fill it today. Its capabilities will enable the observatory to answer questions about our own solar system and investigate faint signals from the first galaxies formed 13.5 billion years ago. Oh, 100%. Like, I'm throwing that on the screen right now. I can, yeah. Maybe it isn't me from YouTube says, I cannot wait until we start receiving collected info from this. Man, I 100% agree with you. One of the things that what is they call it? I forgot the principle, but because there's so many different planets and there's infinite possible planets and stuff out there in the universe, the existence of life is us being the only existence of life in the solar system is very rare. Us being humans and animals, everything on this planet, it's very rare. So I am super interested in learning what is going to be happening from these images and from this infrared capability. And I would like to see that in my lifetime. So I 100% agree with you. This is going to be Very cool. And we will update you as we get more information. So in some good news, because of some bad news, because of some bad things, I guess, Epstein's partner Ghislaine Maxwell was found guilty. Praise be all that is holy, I guess. Although it really sucks that this has even had to go to court. Okay, let me clarify. It sucks that it had to go to court. By that, I mean that the children had to be abused. That got abused, had to be abused. Woof, phrasing. Bad, Anthony. Bad cipher. But what I mean is that it is good that justice is being served in this case. It is bad that this situation had happened in the first place. So let's talk about that a little bit. Yesterday, the jury in a New York federal court found Ghislaine Maxwell guilty on 5 of the 6 counts related to her role in Jeffrey Epstein's sexual abuse of minor girls between 1994 and 2004. Maxwell, who is now 60 years old, was found guilty on 5 federal charges: sex trafficking of a minor, transporting a minor with the intent to engage in criminal sexual activity, and 3 related counts of conspiracy. She was acquitted on the charge of enticing a minor to travel to engage in an illegal act. Maxwell, who now faces up to 65 years in prison, showed no reaction when the verdicts were read. Judge Allison Nathan did not set a sentencing date yet. Now, I mean, that's true. Yeah, okay. So I don't want to get conspiratorial about this. I'm just going to say things that I know to be true and a little bit of things that I think might be true here. So maybe it isn't me as saying, glad she is put away, yet only a woman or female is going away for these crimes. Kind of fucked up. And that is true. But with the evidence that we have, even the kind of extrapolated evidence that we have, it doesn't surprise me that she's the only one being hammed up by this, because it appears that the vast majority of his victims were for his own pleasure and his own gratification. And so, if there was blackmail involved, that got destroyed prior to his death. When he stopped doing it, when he stopped hobnobbing with politicians and other people, that's when this information got destroyed, at least in my opinion, because you don't need the blackmail at that point anymore, right? And so if that information got destroyed before his death, then it isn't likely to have other people found guilty of sex crimes against minors for 2 reasons. One, statute of limitations. While there has been extended statute of limitations, and some states have completely gotten rid of the statute of limitations with crimes involving minors, sex crimes involving minors, they still exist. And so a lot of the stuff that has been purported to have happened about at least 20 years ago, which exceeds the statute of limitations on that. Not only that, what we do know is that a lot of the stuff, even according to his victims, that his things that he recorded and everything was him doing the things, was him committing these heinous sexual crimes. And so a lot of the stuff that's been sealed, it is reasonable to believe that it was just him and the minors in question. A lot of people online are saying, they're like, oh, it's really fishy that they sealed this documents. It's not fishy at all. That part isn't fishy. Documents like these get sealed because it involves minors or people who were minors at the time, and because it is a crime to hold and distribute child pornography. Keeping it out of the public, outside of the public realm, is actually proper procedure. This happens to any kind of criminal sex involving minors. Statutory rape, rape, human trafficking. If it involves minors, any of that evidence, if it's video, photos, or whatever, is sealed and kept away from the public. It also isn't generally shown to juries. If it is shown to juries, it's done just for the jury and nobody else. So yeah, that's why I think this stuff is being happening. I don't think it's a nefarious. I don't think it's a world cabal kind of thing. A lot of people are saying, but again, yeah. So with that, there is some evidence for her maybe being involved in intelligence work because her dad was. And so that might have been what Epstein was doing. Either way, I'd believe that Epstein was really running a blackmail ring, and he happened to be a pedo. Like, I think that's actually what happened. And if you're a pedo, you're gonna use what you like. I hate to say that. So I think that's actually what's happening here. So thank you everybody again for joining the news roundup. So if you like what you're hearing, and I know you do because you're still with us right now, please smash that like button for the algorithms. Follow us on Twitch, follow us on YouTube, follow us on Twitter. It really does help us out. So smash that like button, ring the bell. You know what to do. It does help us out. Continuing on. A shooting rampage happened in Colorado earlier this week. A Denver man went on a shooting rampage this week that left 5 people dead, including the shooter. The Daily Beast reported on the shooter's ideology. So Lyndon McLeod was a self-published author dedicated to alt-right philosophies, including masculine supremacy, contrarian COVID-19 beliefs, and targeted violence against the quote-unquote weak, including those he killed. McLeod appears to have operated a number of Twitter and Instagram accounts under the alias Roman McClay, which he used for his 3-book series, Sanction. The series followed a character named Lyndon McLeod, a persona named after its author, who commits 46 murders in the book series. The Denver Post reported Wednesday that McLeod named 2 of his 5 victims, Alicia Cardenas and Michael Schwinyard, in his books, and even described similar attacks. The first book in the series is described in an Amazon review as an eloquent reflection of dominance hierarchies, psychological, technological, nature, violence, autonomy, and physiology, sexual morality, drug use, politics, and a whole mess of stuff. The Daily Beast found that at least 2 Twitter users identified McLeod and McClay as one and the same, and even years before the shooting. In his post, McLeod, I'm getting a little parched. In his post, McLeod seemed to frequently use excerpts from his work to comment on current events, such as a COVID-19 misinformation meme on Twitter featuring Facebook creator Mark Zuckerberg and Microsoft founder Bill Gates. The meme posted on May 1st of last year, which we'll throw on to. Actually, no, I'm not going to throw it on the screen because I don't want to get banned. So we're not going to show this one, actually. I don't want to get hammed up because of Twitters and Twitches and YouTube's crappy algorithms. So the meme posted on May 1st of last year featured the billionaires discussing their approach to the pandemic, with Gates being thanked for mandatory vaccination while Zuckerberg was congratulated for an injectable nanoworm. Okay. McLeod, who was killed by a Lakewood police officer Monday after shooting her in the abdomen, captioned the photo with a quote from one of his characters in the series. "It's not really a worm so much, however, I understand the point." In his post, he also gleefully indicated that some people required violence to be addressed. While discussing a 2014 YouTube video titled "Mike Tyson Destroys Reporter" on Twitter, McLeod, posting as McClay, blasted the passive-aggressive reporter and praised Tyson for using direct aggression, all before hinting at threats of violence for the weak. "This is basically the plot to my stupid book," he wrote in 2020. "Our entire society is made up of shitty little fucks who insult badasses and get away with it because law enforcement and social norms protect the weak from the strong. And I'm over it. And I'm just so full of rage." The last bit was put on by me. "The weak better buckle up. Shit is about to get real," he wrote. McLeod also appeared in at least 2 YouTube videos, one that posted a day after the Monday rampage. In it, McLeod is described as AKA Roman McClay, and an interviewer who is off camera speaks to him as the two prepare to meet with acquaintances at a Denver hotel in 2019. After the interviewer notes that it's Guy Fawkes Day, November 5th, which commemorates a failed plot to blow up Parliament in Great Britain, McLeod says that the two have different ambitions. I don't think we're blowing anything up, he said, before adding, we are armed and could be dangerous. During a press conference Tuesday, police confirmed that McLeod, who records show owned his own tattoo parlor called the Flat Black Ink, targeted each of the victims. Right-wing rapper and social media personality Zubby hosted McClay on his podcast to discuss sanctions in 2019. The host claimed that the book was currently blowing up on Twitter, though he admitted he had not read it. Now, this is an interesting thing to have said, right? So he is claiming, Zudby here, is claiming that the book was blowing up on Twitter. That just shows you the kind of circles that Zudby, this guy, runs around in. Ain't no one talking about this book unless they're alt-right fuck sticks. Unless they're beefy men that love men, that want men to be beefy and, kill people. So, yeah, that shows you what kind of people he hangs around. Police said that Tuesday that McLeod had previously been investigated in 2020 and 2021, but they did not comment on what he was investigated for. A spokesman for the Denver Police Department told the Daily Beast on Wednesday that they knew of McClay's alias. We are aware of the books written under the name Roman McClay, which are a component of our ongoing homicide investigation, Jay Casillas wrote in an email. So, continuing on, there is a great Twitter feed about all of this. I'm going to drop that in chat. So this is coming from It's Going Down, which are a group of people who work with like, they're called like Antifa journalists kind of, but basically they just, keep tabs on Nazis and Nazi adjacent people. And so I'm going to go ahead and drop that in the chat here. I'm hoping I don't get banned from YouTube for it. Oh, it didn't get sent to Twitch. Interesting. There it goes. All right, so sent to Twitch. But yeah, so that is what's going on there. And you should check it out. There's a lot of information. Some of the stuff we went over, some of the stuff we haven't. But we're going to go ahead and continue on now. So continuing on. So NPR reported on the shootings. McLeod, 47, knew most of the people who shot through business or personal relationship, police have said. 4 of the people who were shot were attacked at a tattoo shop. In addition to those killed, 2 other people were wounded, including a police officer who shot and killed McLeod after being hit. In the first novel, a character named Lendon stalks a poker party held by a character named Michael Schwinyard and gains access to a building near Cheeseman Park by posing as a police officer. He then fatally shoots everyone at the party and robs them before fleeing with his dog in a van. In Monday's attack, Michael Schwinyard, 67, was fatally shot at his home near Denver Cheeseman Park, police said. In his second novel, which also features a character named Lendon, McClay names Alicia Cardenas as a victim. The book also mentions the tattoo shop she worked at, Soul Tribe. Alicia Cardenas, a 44-year-old tattoo artist, was among his first victims in Monday's rampage. She was killed at her tattoo shop along with another woman. A man who was also wounded there is expected to survive, police have said. That shop is less than a mile from the tattoo shop where McLeod was listed as the leaseholder between 2014 and 2016. Cardenas later took it over before moving the shop to its current city, records show. Matt Clark, commander of the Denver Police Department, Major Crimes Division, said McLeod knew most of the people he targeted, but not the last person he shot, a clerk in a hotel in Lakewood's Belmar shopping area. However, McLeod had some dealings with the hotel, Clark said. The hotel clerk died of her injuries on Tuesday. Soon after the shootings at Cardenas' shop, McLeod forced his way into a residence that is also home to a business. Shady records show it was licensed as a tattoo shop. He pursued the occupants through the building and fired shots, but no one was injured, Clark said. Just before 6 p.m., the Lakewood Police Department received a report of shots fired at the Lucky 13 tattoo shop. Danny Schofield, 38, was killed there, Lakewood Police spokesman John Romero said. When officers spotted a car suspected of being involved in the shooting at the Belmar shopping area, where shops lined sidewalks in a modern version of a downtown, McLeod opened fire and officers shot back, Romero Romero said. He ran away and allegedly targeted some people in a restaurant with a gun before going into the Hyatt Hotel, where he spoke briefly with the clerk before shooting her, he said. About a minute later, Lakewood police officer Ashley Ferris saw McLeod and ordered him to drop his weapon. She was shot in the abdomen, but fired back and killed the gunman. The officer underwent surgery Monday night and is expected to make a full recovery. Thank God. So we have a comment coming in from Twitch saying, seems like a complex incel incident. Now, I know we on the left like to distill everything into like one easily digestible thing to give it a name and get people aware of things. And I don't think that's what this was. I think this was more along the lines of misogyny and this whole idea of toxic masculinity, if we want to call it anything else. McLeod supposedly beat his wife, and that is a thing that has seen a lot of people that end up doing mass shootings when they're a little bit older, is that they have a history of violence and a history of toxic ideology, or mental illness or what have you. In McLeod's case, it seemed to be a combination of past wrongs, if I had to take a guess. A lot of the people he targeted, especially the woman who took over his tattoo shop after he sold it or whatever, took over his tattoo shop, seems to be like that. And he had a very weird thing around weak and strong people, and strong should rule and everything like that. And he viewed himself as a strong, masculine, alpha male type of person. But his fifis got hurt, so he had to go on a killing rampage. So that's what we're seeing here. Yeah, I would say that he has power issues. I would definitely say that's a part of it. He has been sorry. If you read the tweet that I posted, there's a lot of references of him being talking on different alt-right and alt-lights podcasts and things like that. So I think it's more of a combination of radical misogyny, radical alpha male ideology, if you want to like that, and the like. So I think that's mostly what this happens is here. Hey, Mixer Sax O'Keet. Appreciate that, buddy. Also, you should thank CSP Nikki or Distilia. She's the one that puts together the copy. We work in tandem on this. I give her some things that I see that are interesting, and she collects other news. But this is very much a team effort, and so I will pass on that word to her, and I appreciate your comments. So, moving on with some other additional news bites. Oh, one other thing. So there's another comment. There is a remolding of masculinity for sure, but it's across the board for both sides. It's just transitional issues, inevitable. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure. It's just a remolding on masculinity for sure, but it's across the board for both sides. I don't know exactly what you mean by that. But I don't know what you mean by that. But I'm going to continue on because we got about 30 minutes left, so we got some more stuff we have to cover. So Harry Reid has died. Former Senator Harry Reid passed away Tuesday after a 4-year battle with pancreatic cancer. He was 82 years old. Mr. Reid, a Nevada Democrat, was Senate Majority Leader from 2007 to 2014. He served 5 terms in the Senate. He was known as a wily tactician, given to malaprops with a brusque and pointed sense of humor. According to the Washington Post, as Majority Leader, he kept an increasingly tight rein on Senate procedure, and his tactics drew angry criticism from Republicans that he abused his authority and smothered the rights of the minority. One complaint was that instead of allowing Senate committees to write legislation, Mr. Reid too often oversaw the drafting process in his office and brought a measure to the floor as a take-it-or-leave-it package, using a parliamentary maneuver to prevent unwanted amendments. He defended his tightly controlled approach as necessary to counter what he described as Republicans' mindless, knee-jerk obstruction of the Obama agenda. His tactics also enabled Democrats to avoid casting votes on controversial measures that could be troublesome at election time. Mr. Reid's most controversial and arguably most consequential move came in 2013, after Republicans filibustered a series of Obama nominees. Under his guidance, Democrats pushed through a rules change, lowering the threshold for confirmations, except for the Supreme Court nominees, from 60 to a simple majority. Republicans railed against what Republican Senator Charles E. Grassley called a complete and total power grab. But Mr. Reid insisted that the GOP's obstruction left no other option. And I tend to agree with this. Whatever the merits, Mr. Reid's use of the nuclear option shifted power from the minority to the majority, and 4 years later allowed the Trump administration to move contested cabinet and judicial picks through the GOP-controlled Senate. While Mr. Reid exempted the Supreme Court nominees from the lower threshold, the Republican majority, citing his rule change as precedent, extended the simple majority requirement to the High Court, leaving Democrats powerless to block the nomination of Neil M. Gorsuch, Brett M. Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett. This may be a lesson for Democrats should consider as they deal with the current Republican obstructionism in the Senate. So continuing on, I'll address those comments towards the end. So everybody, 2021 is coming to a close. 2022 is coming at us fast. Let's look at the entire economy and how it's progressed during this year. Looking back at a turbulent 2021, economists and analysts hit on a few themes to define the economic trajectory of the past year, in which they say will shape the contours of money, markets, and management going into the new year. From NBC News, the year began with a promise of an end to the coronavirus pandemic after the approval of highly effective vaccines and U.S. consumers ready to spend. It ended with the cloud of a pandemic still hanging over the U.S. economy, as successive variants triggered new waves of disease and lockdowns further aggravated roadblocks in the global supply chain. We come into the year with a sort of this euphoria that we had vaccines, says Liz Young, the chief investment officer for SoFi, an online finance company. The early expectations were that the government could mobilize a massive immunization rollout and COVID could be regulated to a historical footnote. We saw some really positive information from consumers, confidence, consumer spending, GDP, Young had also said. There was a lot of optimism about the economy recovering. But in reality, in the form of resistance to the vaccines and political motivated misinformation campaigns, collided with the early public health ambitions. While Americans primed to spend but without enough goods or workers available to meet the budgeting demand, prices started to soar, first for the highly specific goods like computer chips and lumber, and then for everything else. Quote, now we've got this weird problem of inflation being high in a labor market that's sort of stuck, and that's what the rest of the year ended up being about, Young had said. Brad McMillan, chief investment officer at the Commonwealth Financial Network, said it remains unclear how severely the spread of the Omicron variant of the coronavirus will affect economic activity, but he asserted that the companies are better prepared today to handle future coronavirus curveballs. Quote, obviously we had multiple waves this year. Once everything reopened, we learned we can have considerable growth. Looking back, we've learned that the economy can keep operating despite a pandemic. Robust demand was the biggest economic success story, but it also came with a darker flip side in the form of higher prices for rent, to refrigerators, to restaurants, meal, and groceries. Economists and even some monetary policy makers at the Federal Reserve have had to revisit their expectations for when inflation would cool. It was only in the last 2 months of the year that the Fed Chairman Jerome Powell retreated from the stance that such prices spikes were transitory. I'm going to disagree with that a little bit. I think he still thinks it's transitory. It's just that it hasn't stopped quickly as he thought. But it's still, we're not looking until March before they taper all the way down from their bond buying program. So I think they're still thinking it's transitory. Quote, the two big things for 2021 were inflation and labor shortage, said Dan North, a senior economist at Euler Herman's North America. North said that U.S. consumers have been reaping the benefits of globalization in the form of low prices for a growing array of imported goods. Over the past few decades, the U.S. has been exposed to countries where the wage rate was very, very low, he said. That's what has kept inflation down. COVID threw a wrench into this finely tuned machine. This is what we talk about when we talk about just-in-time supply chains. Combination of repeated shutdowns across Asia, port bottlenecks, and shortages of all kinds of goods and components turn the U.S. advantage into a liability. When you add in the supply chain disruptions, that of course makes the situation worse, North said. On top of that came a surge in energy prices, which sent inflationary pressures sweeping into nearly every remaining crevice of business and industry. Now, I want to, before I continue on, I want to talk about just-in-time supply. So it's exactly what you think it is when you hear that kind of phrase. Suppliers keep just enough stock on hand to meet demand over a certain number of months. Typically speaking, that's a 3-month period. If that supply is drawn down all the way without new supply coming in to make it up, you're going to have a backlog if demand increases at all. Because of the economy shutting down and because of people still needing goods and services, especially around computer manufacturing, there was a supply crunch. And hold on a second. Sorry, my dog was bothering me in the background. So you're going to see a supply crunch. And with that supply crunch, you're going to see prices increase as money chases fewer goods. Didn't matter if there was more money in the economy or not, because of this disruption in the supply chain that essentially destroyed just-in-time supply chains, you were going to see an increase in prices. Continuing on. Lackluster improvement in the labor force participation rate, even as the top line unemployment numbers improved more quickly than many had predicted, was another expensive headwind for companies. Now, this is what's coming here is we're seeing like the Great Resignation and as well as people retiring early because of a variety of different reasons. So a good number of people quitting and a multi-million worker gap between the numbers of available jobs and applicants willing to take them, partly due to the fact that 6 million people across the world died. Companies had to raise pay to attract and keep talent. After years of growth below the 3.5% to 4% rate that economists considered optimal for economic expansion, rapidly rising wages meant U.S. companies were paying more for labor costs on top of rising costs for equipment and materials and other inputs. And yet, despite a few bouts of volatility, stocks soared in defiance of the looming threat posed by rising inflation. From an investment standpoint, it was a pretty perfect year, said Eric Ditton, the president and managing director of the Wealth Alliance. Young suggested, however, that the party might be winding down. The euphoria can only last so long, she said. We got to the end of the year and I think reality struck, in the sense that as the stock market has been on the runway tear, the reality of the situation is there are some cracks in the economic pavement. The latest inflation projections indicate the higher prices are set to linger through at least the first half of 2022, in a climate of tightened monetary policy rather than the ultra-accommodative stance the Fed adopted in March of 2020, and remained committed to until recently, Young said. We're not going to be in an environment of unlimited liquidity, she said. Valuations matter more. And that is what we're seeing from the economy. But a look ahead. According to NBC News, reported the top issues economists have on their radar for 2022. One second. I'm sorry about that, everybody. My dog is apparently itchy today, and the itching on the collar was just driving me nuts. All right, continuing on. According to data from the National Association of Realtors, the median price for an existing home rose just under $354,000 as of November, the most recent month of which data is available, an annual increase of around 14%. Economists predicted that the prospect of higher interest rates could act as a brake on home prices gains next year, because paying more to a service mortgage leaves homebuyers with less money for payments each month. Dale Fairweather, the chief economist of the online real estate company Redfin, said in a new report that the real estate activity will spike in the first half of the year as buyers and sellers alike scramble to close deals before rates rise. She predicted a 30-year mortgage rate will rise from the current level of about 3% to 3.6% by the end of the year, which would translate into an additional $100 a month payment at the median. Despite the rate pressure, however, Fairweather predicted that home prices will tick up by just 3% next year. Now, this is where demographics come into play. Millennials are finally at the age of they're starting to form families. What COVID did, as far as buying homes, was that it pushed people to do it sooner than they would have otherwise. Why? Because a lot of people started working from home and needed their own personal space. I got my home just before the pandemic hit. I wasn't really worried about the pandemic. I wanted more space and didn't want to pay more for my apartment than it would be for a mortgage at the time. And so I bought my house. I was 35 at the time. When people are between the ages of 28 and 36 is typically when they buy their first home. The youngest millennial at this point, if you go based on the 1996, is around 24 years old. And so, the youngest millennial, if you go by 2000, is 21 years old. If you go by 1996, that is 25 years old. So you're at the prime age of people starting to form families. And that's going to put pressure on housing prices. Why? Because millennials are the largest generation in existence right now. Despite the fact that boomers are going to slowly die off just as they get older, you're going to see people wanting to buy newer homes, and a lot of banks, and that supply of housing that currently exists in the market in various cities isn't enough to meet the demand that's going to be generated by millennials and older Zoomers. And so that is going to cause prices to increase. I, like we've said here, do not expect prices to come down anytime soon. So if you're looking to buy, there's two things that you can do. You can buy right now and hope that the economy doesn't crash in 2 years. That way you don't kick yourself in the ass. Or you can wait 2 or 3 years and hope the economy crashes to buy a cheaper house. I wouldn't bet on the economy crashing that much. It's not going to be a 2008 situation. If it does, it'll be a minor recession. I don't see the contagion that we saw in 2008 causing a swoon of people to have to foreclose on their houses or to file for bankruptcy because they're going to not be that much contagion. A lot of debt isn't wrapped up in home wealth right now. And so I don't expect the housing prices to come down all that much unless we start building a lot more housing. That's always a possibility. Kind of. So I don't know. It depends on where your risk tolerance is. There's not a really one answer for this. But as I said, I don't expect housing prices to come down. The growth might slow, but they'll still grow. So that's what you're going to see. Now, while home prices might be cooling, renters aren't going to get any kind of relief yet. Rents are increasing at double digits, said Jay Hatfield, the founder and CEO of Infrastructure Capital Management. If the government still calculated inflation today using the same models it did in the 70s, the spike in rent costs this year would have been reflected in the real inflation rate north of 10%. A big reason the current inflationary climate has created greater financial challenges for renters. This has basically never happened. We've never had this kind of national inflation for rent, Hatfield said. Fairweather predicted another year of higher rents, estimating a 7% increase nationwide in 2022. Demand for rentals will be strong for several reasons. First, the end of mortgage forbearance will cause many homeowners to sell and rent instead. As the pandemic subsides, more people will choose to live in cities where it's more common to rent. In addition, she said, the booming labor market and the ability of many knowledge economy workers to do their job remotely could also trigger demand for rentals if newly arriving residents want to rent before they buy homes. The supply of homes will remain an issue, economists have said. A report in June commissioned by the National Association of Realtors found that the U.S. housing market has a demand-supply gap of 6.8 million units, and that the higher prices for materials and labor will make closing the gap even more challenging. This is why the Build Back Better plan is needed, because some of the money goes to affordable housing. Come on. We just need it. All right. Continuing on, though, it would not be an exaggeration to label 2021 as the year of the worker. An expert says that the new year is likely to reflect more of the same, at least at first. Longer term, I think we're going to continue to see labor shortages, but in the next year or so, it's going to get better, Wagner had said. The consulting firm Deloitte found in a recent survey of chief financial officers that companies expect to invest in and spend on equipment, technology, and human capital next year. There's going to continue to be a significant increase in domestic hiring and domestic wages, said Steve Gallucci, the leader of Deloitte's chief financial officer program in North America. Yet even the Federal Reserve Board Chairman Jerome Powell admitted that policymakers were perplexed by the extent to which labor force's participation remained depressed this year. It shouldn't surprise anyone. Labor force participation rate isn't actually that low. They need to change how they measure it to include more people that are doing gig work. People are working, right? Now there's more people probably staying at home, a little bit more, mainly around probably among women because of the lingering pandemic situation, because there's still people that are afraid to send their kids to school. The child credits came in, and so that allowed people that were doing part-time jobs to not necessarily have to do them for a little bit and stuff. So yeah, that's what we saw for that and the like. We got 10 minutes here, so we're going to skip the rest of this bit and the look ahead just to talk about inflation. So the inflation question is paramount because it touches on so many facets of the economic landscape. Federal Reserve policy and interest rates paid by borrowers, as well as prices on goods and services bought by individuals, as well as companies. I would argue what we're seeing right now with inflation is a combination of two things. It's a perfect storm, said Brad McMillan, the chief investment officer for Commonwealth Financial Networks. High demand for goods triggered by service sector shutdowns and by supportive monetary and fiscal policy that was rolled out last year was on a collision course with a global supply chain that had effectively had sand poured into its gears. All of a sudden, the demand for things spiked, and just as supply of things cratered. The question going forward is that going to continue? And I don't think it's going to continue. If you've seen me on this program before, you know that I believe that we're going to see a return to somewhat normal, not entirely, but a lot of prices will start to come down on some goods and services around March for a number of different reasons. One, labor is going to come back in. That's going to get handled. Supply chains in China will be reconfigured. Southeast Asia, China, the world will get reconfigured, and that backlog will be adjusted for because there's breathing room after Christmas. And hopefully, knock on wood, it rains a lot in the Pacific West and South America to help bring down food prices. So those are the things I think we're going to see. We're also going to see oil prices come down as OPEC starts to produce more oil after recuperating losses from the previous year. What we're not going to see is a return to normal in chip manufacturing. So electronics are still going to be expensive. That means cars, computers, cell phones, they're still going to be pretty pricey. But other things should come down. And so we might see some modest deflation starting probably around July or so, if not a little sooner, depends on the harvest and when OPEC starts returning to normal. But I'm shooting for July. But that will be a good thing because it will be temporary, and then inflation will be normalized probably around 4% or so, which should be the Fed's actual target, not 2%. I can talk about why, but we're running out of time. So let's continue to go. Let's continue on. So we have some good news, some very good news happened right before Christmas. Kellogg's strike ended with a victory for the union. Let's get into it. On December 23rd, NPR reported that Kellogg's strike is over and the employers won. The union representing striking workers at 4 Kellogg's breakfast cereal plants has ratified a deal to end an 11-week work stoppage. Approval of a new 5-year contract for the 1,400 affected workers came after a tentative deal was announced last week. Kellogg's had threatened to replace striking workers at plants in Michigan, Nebraska, Pennsylvania, and Tennessee, prompting criticism from the Biden administration. Quote, Our striking members at Kellogg's ready-to-eat cereal production facilities courageously stood their ground and sacrificed so much in order to achieve a fair contract, Anthony Shelton, president at the Bakery, Confectionery, Tobacco Workers, and Grain Millers International Union, said in a statement on Tuesday. This agreement makes gains and does not include any concessions. The company said in a statement that the ratified deal furthers our employees' leading wages and benefits with immediate across-the-board wage increases and enhanced benefits for all. We are pleased that we have reached an agreement that brings our cereal employees back to work, Kellogg CEO Steve had said. We look forward to their return and continuing to produce our beloved cereal brands for our customers and consumers. The most contentious issue had been a two-tiered benefit system that paid workers hired after 2015 at a lower scale than quote-unquote legacy employees. The union said the collective bargaining agreement ratified in a vote over the weekend meant that there would be no permanent two-tiered system. The union also said it had secured a pledge of no plant closings through October of 2026, which is great because that means they're contractually obligated to keep plants open even in the midst of an economic recession during those times, which gives the union more leveraging power to secure employment during hard times. This is a good thing. A clear path to regular full-time employment and significant increases in the pensions multiplier. Now, the reason that the two-tiered system was so contentious is because what it would eventually lead to is that the older workers would get fired over minor infractions and other bullshit, so they could get their keep their wage costs low and also fuck over their new employees. That's why the union was against it, and the union was against it for a good reason. So good on the union on that. Now, if you are just joining the roundup, or if this is the first time you've ever joined the roundup, we like to close off with a little thing that we like to call news of the weird. Some weird news. And today we are going to share with you a TikToker that is selling farts in a bottle.
Showing you a day in the life of a girl.
Remember, sex work is work, people. And I'm not saying that just to
Hey guys, today
So we're going to show this over. Let me see how this looks. All right. Okay. Let me see how this looks again. All right. So that's about as big as I can get. Oh, wait. I can do this. There we go. Oops. There we go. So we're going to watch this.
I'm going to be showing you a day in the life of a girl who sells her farts in a jar. So I like to get things rolling with some beans, a protein muffin, sometimes even a yogurt. Less sugar is better, some hard-boiled eggs. And today I decided I was going to make myself a protein shake with some yogurt added to it. And oh, I was feeling it for sure. While I wait for those farts to develop, I like to read. I'm very smart, love to read. And then after I'm ready to go, I go ahead and, do my work, do my job. I don't need to show you that.
So this is probably a troll, but this happens. So it's hard to know, mainly because I don't know this person. I don't know if this is real or not, but she's getting
guys, but I like to add in little flower petals. I feel like they attach the scent and make it last longer. And when I'm finally finished with my jar, I like to leave a personalized note. I want to thank you so much to the 97 people who've already purchased their jar of farts. And as you know, they're on sale right now, 50% off of $1,000. So
$1,000 for a fart in a jar. Guys, you're not a credit to your gender. Wow. Okay. I don't want to kink shame anybody. All right. I don't care if you like smelling women's farts or your partner's farts or anybody's farts. I don't give a shit. But you're spending $1,000 on that. You could be doing so much more with that $1,000. Like helping you get a girlfriend that will just fart for you for free. Fellas. Come on, man. You're embarrassing me.
So go to my Unfiltered and check it. Hey.
Check it out, she says. It'll be fun, she says. It'll be a good time, she says. I don't know about all that, man. This is something kind of weird. Like, what? So let's talk about this. Let's talk about some more of this, all right? So US Magazine did a report on this. That was the TikTok videos talking about it. So let's talk about this. So this woman is Stephanie Matto, is a 90-Day Fiancé alumnus and has been supplementing her income, and her methods is quite unique. The reality star, 31, went viral after she claimed in Tuesday, December 14th, YouTube video that she made nearly $100,000 selling her farts in a jar. I have perfected my craft, Matto said on Tuesday. I kind of feel like I am the Einstein of fart jars at this point because I've figured out the perfect formula for making the most in the least amount of time, but also causing me the least amount of pain. The content creator went on to note that she sold around 175 jars for a total of $100,000 in profits, adding that she has the monopoly on farts in a jar. It is pretty crazy, Matto said in Touch on Tuesday. The thing is, what I find really awesome about this whole entire new fart in a jar venture is that I think it inspired a lot of people to think outside the box, phrasing, as far as a way they can make money. So yeah, sounds like fetish stuff. Even if she's a troll, I can guarantee that it's happening somewhere. True! Based. Andrew Harris coming out with the actual information. That is very true. Very, very true. It is happening somewhere. And you know what? I believe she's doing it, and I believe she's making this kind of money because people are strange. And people are strange when you're a stranger. Faces look ugly when you're alone. And with that, everybody, I am sad to say that we are out of time. Thank you, everybody, so much for tuning into the program today. We had a lot of good comments in the chat. We were able to utilize my new Stream Deck and get you the best news that we can produce on a weekly basis. And for that, and for you making sure that for you attending us, we are very thankful, because without you, we would just be a couple of people shouting into the void that is the internet. So remember, we do this show live every Thursday, unless stated otherwise, from 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to roughly about 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We cover the news that was of the last week and give you the kind of analysis only the crowd that can provide. We also do other kinds of podcasts here with guests. You can be on the show, everybody. Oh my God. One of those podcasts is called Cypher State. Cypher State is a foreign affairs and foreign policy focused podcast that we dive deep into an issue facing the geopolitical sphere and cover a topic roughly in about an hour, kind of giving you analysis and history about a particular topic, and with a diverse cast of intellectuals and whatever. So if that's something you're interested in, you can generally catch that on the third Sunday of every month live or wherever you get your podcast. We are also trying to build up our Discord community. Please join the Discord. It really is where you want to be. We're going to be having contests in the new year. Stay tuned for that as well. And if you don't do Discord, but you do Facebook, go ahead and join the Facebook group. The Facebook group is Facebook/groups/Tribune Commons, where you can find a lot of information about us and hobnob with people of like mind. And we also run a nonprofit. The nonprofit is called the Crowdsourced Tribune. Crowdsourced Tribune is registered nonprofit in the state of Texas. And what we do with our nonprofit is that we host our charity streams. We are trying to tamp down on vitriol. We are trying to help people get engaged in their communities from a political angle. And so if that's something that you want to get interested in, be sure to stay tuned to this program, to our Facebook group, our Discord, or our Twitter for additional information, because we've got a lot of stuff developing for next year. And wherever you are, I hope that you have the best and your new year is enjoyable, is eventful in the right possible way, that you get your midnight kiss and you start off your new year's right. But everybody, we are out of time. So as we say at Crowdsourced Politics, keep your head up through the political storm.